It is November 7th, and this is The National. Tonight, two Canadian cities are remembering men who made a big impact on their communities. One, a fallen police officer, the other, a baseball great. We'll take you to Abbotsford, BC in a moment, but first, the life and legacy of Roy Halladay. If you're a fan of the Toronto Blue Jays, you know that one of the team's greatest players was killed today in a plane crash. He's also being remembered tonight by many families as an athlete with an extraordinary commitment to philanthropy and a man with a deep connection to Canada. As his death was announced by a Florida police force that knew him well, it was clear Roy Halladay was a class act.
It was a two-passenger plane, but I can confirm there's only one body involved. And it's sad to say it's a friend of ours. It's Roy Halladay. Many know Roy as a Cy Young winner, future Hall of Famer, one of the best pitchers to ever pitch in the game of baseball. We know Roy as a person, as a caring husband who loved his wife, Brandy. He loved his two boys tremendously.
At age 21, the Colorado native thrilled fans with a near no-hitter in just his second start for the Blue Jays.
What a show put on here this afternoon by Roy Halladay.
The best was yet to come for the man nicknamed Doc Halladay. Traded to Philadelphia in 2009, he's one of only 6 major league pitchers to win the Cy Young Award in both the American and National Leagues, and the 5th to have multiple no-hitters in the same season.
Castro has it, spins, fires, a perfect game! Roy Halladay has thrown the second perfect game in Philadelphia Phillies history.
Halladay retired from baseball in 2013.
Along with the Blue Jays and Phillies hats, I have my new team hats up here. These are the hats of my son's teams, and I'm helping out coaching. I'm trying not to ruin them. I'm doing the best I can.
He then pursued a lifelong goal of being a pilot, as his father had been. An aircraft manufacturer made much about his love for their craft. His enthusiastic tweets about flying, now so poignant. I've dreamed about owning an A5 since I retired. Real life is better than my dreams. And of course, tributes are pouring in for Halladay from his adopted Canadian city, his fans, and other baseball players. Roy Halladay was your favorite player's favorite player, tweeted LA Dodgers pitcher Brandon McCarthy.
Roy Halladay was one of those players who gave us joy in years where there wasn't much to be joyful about. I mean, the Jays were our team, but they didn't make the playoffs. We never produced a team for him that got them to the playoffs under his leadership, but he was, voted by Blue Jay fans as the greatest starting pitcher we ever had. That's the fans that said that.
The Jays put out a statement, too, saying they're overcome by grief with the tragic loss of one of the franchise's greatest and most respected players, but even better human being. Impossible to express what he's meant to this franchise, the city, and its fans. Well, Jamie Campbell has been the host of the Blue Jays broadcast on Sportsnet. You did play-by-play for many of the games that Halladay played in. First of all, your reaction when you heard the news?
Oh, Ian, I was torn. I was actually just about to drive my own son to a hockey game and heard the news, and the first thing I thought of was Roy's two boys, Braden and Ryan, and how much he cherished the relationship he had with them, especially post-retirement. So I put my car in park and cried for a little bit, because I can only imagine what pain they're enduring right now.
He was exceptional on the field, we know that, but exceptional too off.
Yeah, he was a very charitable man, as you noted, but also a very insulated athlete. He was a very tough person to get to understand, because his pursuit of excellence was so devoted. In fact, to have a word with Roy, most days during the season, you had to book an appointment with him. And I don't know where that drive of his came from, but it was noticeable. And I remember on days when he was pitching, and I told him before the season ever began that if you see me pass you in the hotel lobby or at the ballpark and not even say hello to you, it's for a reason, because I know you're so driven to succeed that I don't want to interrupt your day in that regard. There were some teammates who later said that after they left the organization, they approached him and asked him if he actually didn't like them, because the way he responded to them made them feel like at times they weren't even teammates.
So in spring training in Dunedin, Florida, a time when a lot of players are relaxed, you were telling me in order for you to make sure you talk to him, you had to get there when?
4:30 in the morning. perhaps 5 a.m., Roy made a habit of always being the first player there to work out every morning, and his workouts were maniacal. So his drive was so intense that if you really wanted to have a word with him before his day began, it would probably be best to show up at 4:30 or 5. And even if you did, chances are he was already there and lifting weights.
Oh, you sound like you're going to miss him, Jamie. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For many, it was Halladay's commitment to fans and philanthropy that made him a champion. He and his wife hosted 6 children and their families in their own luxury suite. For years, his Toronto contract included an annual pledge of $100,000 to the Blue Jays Care Foundation. Isaac McFadden from Campbellford, Ontario, is just one of the many people whose life was enriched by Halladay. McFadden was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder when he was just 18 months old. Isaac met Halladay for the first time in 2008 when he was 4. The Blue Jays ace donated money to a charitable foundation named after Isaac and invited him to a baseball game in Philadelphia in 2010. Well, tonight, Isaac and his father told us what Halladay meant to them.
I was sad. He was like a hero to me. He donated to the Isaac Foundation all the time. In fact, one of his awards, he dedicated fully to finding a cure for the disease I have. And he was really kind to me and stuff. Once I even got to throw the first pitch on for a baseball game. I met Roy 5 or 6 times, but we kept in contact with email. He's very kind, generous, a good person.
He was unbelievable. He meant a lot to us. When we were first dealing with Isaac's diagnosis, he was one of the first people to believe in our mission, believe in our at that time, far-fetched idea that we were going to find a cure for Isaac. And to give us the opportunity to just take a time out from life and watch a baseball game and be treated like all-stars by him and by Brandy as well was pretty remarkable and unbelievable. And it came at a time when we needed it desperately. The idea that the world has lost somebody that is so remarkably giving and remarkably compassionate for other people is difficult to think about. One of my best memories was when he brought the boys onto the field in Philadelphia. He had been traded down there, and the boys were upset that he was not in Toronto anymore and they couldn't see him anymore. And his wife and himself, they invited us to Philadelphia. And bringing the boys onto the field to play catch with him, and there was this moment when they were leaving and Isaac just ran over and gave him a big hug, and we captured a picture of it. And for me, that's one of the endearing memories that I'll have of Roy and who he was.
I want him to be remembered by the kindness and generosity he showed me and my family.
Andrew, he was a great baseball player, but as we saw there, he was a whole lot more.
Well, yeah, and you're a father, I'm a father, and to hear that father and son relate that experience, that's something special. Well, dedicated and heroic. Those are 2 words being used to describe Constable John Davidson tonight, a veteran police officer who was shot and killed in the line of duty yesterday near Vancouver. It's something that hasn't happened in British Columbia in 30 years, but when bullets started flying and the public was in danger, Constable Davidson went into the fray.
We ask our police officers that when somebody is putting people's lives at danger, when there's an active shooter, we no longer wait for cover, we no longer set up teams. The first person in goes. John Davidson was the first person in, and away he went, and he died protecting you and me.
Killing a police officer, that's an automatic first-degree murder charge. The paperwork's already been filed. And Davidson was an officer for a long time, 24 years. He started out in the UK. A little over a decade ago, moved to Abbotsford, about an hour east of Vancouver, and quickly carved out a reputation for himself as someone who cared a great deal about kids. He worked quite a bit in schools and even headed a junior police academy, showing kids the ropes about what it's like to be an officer. And the tributes to Constable Davidson are still pouring in, reflecting a man who changed the community in which he served. Greg Rasmussen spent the day speaking with some of those people whose lives he touched.
A small community hit hard in mourning. Those who knew him described John Davidson as a cop with endless energy who believed policing meant working with kids rather than just arresting them.
He was such an incredible person. He was always supportive, and he was always funny, and he was always there if you needed someone to talk to, and just such a genuine person.
Drew Fournier helped him with this drug prevention video.
And it's not always easy to say no.
Created after her friend died of an overdose. Colleagues say it's like losing a member of the family.
He was a hero then, and he's a hero now, even more so. He will be we're just so sad, and we miss him deeply. We'll never forget him. He's just one of those guys you'll never forget.
His chief remembers him as an athlete, an avid cyclist who looked far younger than his 53 years of age.
John died doing what we asked him to do. We honor John by looking after his family. We honor John by looking after each other. And we honor John by protecting this community. And that's what we're going to do.
At a high school where he worked as liaison officer for 4 years, flags are at half staff. He stayed in touch with many students long after graduation. Nicole Provost remembers how he broke down barriers.
He talked to everyone, and he was just super fun and inclusive and amazing to have around.
Abbotsford's police chief says as his members grieve, there's still police work to do and a family to comfort.
The family are in shock. The family are going to draw together and look after each other, but it's going to be quite a journey.
Constable John Davidson leaves behind a wife and 3 adult children. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Now, alongside the grief, there's also the search for answers. Just a short while ago, RCMP homicide detectives shared what they know about the man charged with first-degree murder, Oscar Ferdinand Arfman. They're liaising with their counterparts in Alberta, where he's from, to learn more about him. But beyond the fact that Arfman has no criminal record and did not have a valid firearms license at the time of the shooting, they don't have much.
A big part of why I'm here is that we need to know more about Mr. Arfman and his movements leading up to the events yesterday. So any friends, any associates that are watching this right now, if you knew Mr. Arfman, please come forward and speak with our investigators.
Arfman is still in hospital, injured in the confrontation with police, but we're told he's conscious. He'll appear in court later this month. His family has also reportedly said they will be releasing a statement soon.
Here's what else we're following tonight on The National. Prince Charles is the latest big name to pop up in the Paradise Papers. We'll have reaction from London.
And the family of a man accused of being an ISIS fighter plead with the government to bring him home, but should it?
And 2 women are speaking to CBC News about sexual harassment on a Toronto movie set. Plus, we ask some of you to share your experiences.
I don't have the answer to this. This is a complicated question. I know that I was definitely a victim of sexual harassment and assault.
When this kind of behavior is tolerated in the workplace, when there is a culture of harassment and sexual violence, really good people leave. People are prevented from moving forward in their career, and good and smart employees are already taking this seriously.
The Liberal government says it's taking the issue of harassment seriously, unveiling legislation today to protect federal employees, to make it easier for them to report abuse in the workplace. Meanwhile, though, pressure keeps building for movie and TV executives to tackle the issue of sexual harassment ever since those first accusations against film mogul Harvey Weinstein surfaced a month ago. And now, dramatic new allegations. The New Yorker says that Weinstein hired an army of spies to stop accusers from going public, something he dismissed as fiction. But it's not just south of the border. Sexual harassment allegations have also hit Hollywood North, and women in the entertainment industry here in Canada are speaking out and demanding change.
It's awful when you disclose to someone something horrible that happens and they're like, just, you're the lucky one. Like, I don't feel lucky.
Chantal Cousineau is one of two actresses speaking out tonight to CBC News. They allege film director James Toback behaved inappropriately and no one stepped in to stop him. CBC's Salima Shivji now on the disturbing complaints that have fallen on deaf ears.
I worked on a film called Harvard Man in 2000.
Aren't you supposed to be in your astronomy class?
A bit part, but a big deal for Chantal Cousineau, her first time in front of the camera at 19 years old. The director was James Toback.
As they set up this camera right in my face, and he said, you know, action on the rehearsals, he started masturbating. And it was really obvious what was happening. He was wearing windbreaker pants and a black t-shirt, and he was rubbing himself over his pants. And the noise was very loud and obvious. And then I was working. I was doing my scene.
The allegation has not been proven in court, but it was one of the first reported against Toback. More than 300 women have now made similar claims, allegations Toback denies. Police in Beverly Hills have opened an investigation after receiving multiple complaints.
Okay, that's right. That's good.
Behind the scenes on the Toronto set of Harvard Man, Cousineau says Toback ruled, and the trauma stuck with her for years.
I started having panic attacks whenever I was in a working relationship with, you know, casting or directors, producers. I had a hard time breathing.
So much so that her film career stalled. Cousineau moved into commercials where she felt more safe. Fast forward to now, the cascade of allegations against top Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein led to the Me Too campaign, which opened the floodgates. Cousineau and other women started sharing their allegations against Toback, creating a sisterhood online.
I was talking to 2 or 3 women who were disclosing to me a day for about 3 or 4 days. And then before you knew it, there was 38 of us.
Strangers a few weeks ago, Cousineau and Hollywood star Selma Blair are now close. They've supported each other as Blair struggled with the thought of speaking out.
I was frightened. I didn't want to be a part of this. But then talking, one voice that seemed very thoughtful and responsible and that I could relate to or that could be a calming force was Chantal.
Still, Blair, who alleges Toback assaulted her in a hotel room, an allegation that has not been proven in court, found she couldn't bring herself to speak about it on the record.
I was disgusted. I was really disgusted for so many years by it, disgusted with myself, the way he made me feel. But I did feel if I kept staying quiet. But no, I didn't want to be a part of this conversation.
What changed her mind was the director's strongly worded denial of the allegations, both to the LA Times and to Rolling Stone, in this conversation recorded 3 weeks ago.
This is just too stupid. I mean, these are people I don't know, and it's things I would never have done.
It just gets the message out there.
Unlike others, Cousineau tried to report what happened to her. That same day, she called her union.
I called ACTRA in Canada, and I said to the woman who I was speaking to, the director I worked with today, he was masturbating. You know, like, can you believe it? Like, she goes, was it James Toback? And I was completely taken aback. I said, did someone call from set? And she said, no. We've had, 72 written complaints about James Toback's practices during the audition process over the last 4 weeks. And I was surprised, but comforted in the fact that I wasn't alone in the situation. And she said, I suggest you leave it. She said, at least you got the job. Let someone else fall on the sword. And that's awful.
Did the union fail its members who were dealing with harassment?
I can't say no. I can't say no, but I think the industry failed them. There were so many crew members and producers and everyone on set when that happened. Who failed her? Everyone saw it.
ACTRA says it did send representatives to the set of Harvard Man after receiving a number of complaints. How many, they can't confirm. But the union says it couldn't do much more than that.
My business reps at the time couldn't throw him off a set. It was up to his studios and producers. The process, when there's a complaint, goes back to the production to investigate. So they take their time.
The union wants to fix that and is meeting with producers and directors to work on changing the culture. All welcome news for Cousineau.
These changes are like in politics, you know, sometimes it's a snail's pace, but it is moving. And every step is uplifting.
Small steps that make speaking out worthwhile. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, as Salima mentioned there, ACTRA is going to bring the film and TV industry together in about 2 weeks' time to discuss just how they can change the culture around sexual harassment and assault in that industry. Some of the ideas on the table: getting rid of meetings in hotel rooms, setting up an industry-wide system to track harassment complaints, and using technology like those used on college campuses that allow victims to easily report assault. Right around the world, online, probably in your own living rooms, people are talking about this issue more than ever, sharing their stories and debating what exactly is appropriate. So we did something a little bit different. We set up a chair in a park, we invited people to sit down, and then we handed them a question about harassment. Watch what happened next.
What is sexual harassment?
I think you could call sexual harassment a brush on the knee these days. 30 years ago, a brush on the knee was nothing. It was a come on. So yeah, I don't know, tough question.
Some people who are really scared that they're going to get accused of something that they don't even know is wrong. I don't have the answer to this. This is a complicated question. I know that I was definitely a victim of sexual harassment and assault as an actor, on camera, sometimes just on set in front of casts and crew.
There's boundaries in how you act towards people, and it's just, I think it's like human rights. Like, it's not okay for you to just grope someone in public.
In the service industry, I was a victim of sexual harassment just as often as I was an actor. As a server, they say, well, yes, I did see him grab your breast, so what? You're in the service industry, what did you expect?
Sexual harassment, I think it's when someone makes a sexual gesture towards you and it's inappropriate, it makes you feel uncomfortable. And this is Canada, it's zero tolerance.
Have I done it myself? I think perhaps when I was younger and probably more naive, I think I was following social norms and what I thought was acceptable at the time.
I would say I've brushed my hand against a woman's leg, but I would also say women have brushed their hands against my leg. And I'm not somebody who would immediately say, I'm going to claim sexual harassment for that situation. But a woman may do, I don't know, because they may feel more threatened than I would do as a man.
I'm not gonna say no, because there are times females, they do dress inappropriate in public, and you as a gentleman, you're gonna look. But it's how hard you look, how far you take that look, stuff like that. So that's my take on it.
This will bring change. I think people will take a stance against this.
I don't have the answers. I do know that asking the question is a good place to start, and I'm surprised that it's taken till 2017.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to bring our red chair across the country, maybe not that exact one, but a red chair across the country to get your thoughts on some of the big issues of the day like that one, and then show them here in a regular feature on The National. Coming up on this show, Paul Hunter takes the gun debate to a shooting range. Voices from Sutherland Springs. Next.
There are no easy answers to this. That's the bottom line in this. There's no easy answers at all.
On the National tonight, we're tracking a developing story out of the U.S., the race for governor of Virginia. Heading into tonight, it was looking like a tight race between Democrat Ralph Northam and his Republican rival, Ed Gillespie. There was even talk about this perhaps being a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency. But already tonight, we have a winner. Northam has taken the race for the Democrats. Our Washington correspondent, Keith Bogue, has been watching this race for us for a while now. And Keith, you tell me, how big a deal is this for the Democrats?
Well, it's a much bigger deal than we thought it was going to be. I mean, going into tonight, we expected the Democrats would win, but we thought that if there's a big story, it's going to be that they lose and that there will be endless soul searching and despair within the party. But no one really saw a victory as big as the one that we are seeing tonight. And it looks like the answer is turnout, as it so often is, but the turnout is massive. It's bigger in some parts of the state than it was for the presidential election a year ago. That's for Democrats. And for Republicans, it's significantly lower than it was a year ago in the presidential election. And so there are all kinds of tea leaves that are going to be read into this result tomorrow. But Democrats are going to be terrifically encouraged by the way they were able to attract their vote with an anti-Trump message. Now, speaking of the president, he has already weighed in with his thoughts. He is, of course, doing this on Twitter. He said, Ed Gillespie worked hard but did not embrace me or what I stand for. Don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win even bigger than before. So let me break that down for you a bit. Ed Gillespie worked hard but did not embrace me. True. But the implication that Trump is hoping for is that Gillespie would have done better if he had embraced Trump. There's no evidence of that. But the second part of that sentence is he didn't embrace me or what I stand for. That is not true. Gillespie did embrace what Donald Trump stands for. In fact, Trump's political advisor, his master strategist, Steve Bannon, said today that this race, even if the Republicans were only close, would prove that Trumpism can win even without Trump. So Trumpism or Trump, whichever way you want to look at it, really was the issue here. And the Democratic candidate made Trump the central part of his campaign. In some of his literature, he had a picture of Trump on his door-to-door pamphlets that was bigger than the picture of the candidate himself. And so, you know, this is probably the most important victory that the Democrats have had. No, it's certainly the most important victory the Democrats have had since the election last year. The wins that Trump is referring to were congressional races, special elections that were all held in districts that the Republicans were expected to win. And while that was true of the Democratic race here, as I said earlier, the turnout tonight is really going to hearten Democrats that they have a winning message and that their base is motivated to get out and deliver that message, and the message is to the President of the United States.
All right, Keith Bogue, thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Another big win to tell you about in Virginia tonight, and this one is historic. Democrat Danica Roem became the first openly transgender person in the United States to be elected to a state legislature. She unseated Republican incumbent Bob Marshall, one of Virginia's most socially conservative lawmakers. Earlier this year, he introduced a so-called bathroom bill that was killed in committee. Another big story in the U.S. that we're following tonight, uncovering the past of the gunman behind Sunday's church massacre in Texas.
All of a sudden, I hear like firecrackers pumping. Ta, 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 ta. And it was so scary, and that man was shooting. I mean, he was shooting hard.
That's one of the survivors of Devin Kelly's shooting spree that killed 26 people. Investigators still aren't sure why he did it, but we know he had a history of violence and mental health issues. According to U.S. media, police records show Kelly was a patient at a psychiatric hospital several years ago, even escaped briefly in 2012. He was technically serving with the U.S. Air Force at the time, but was court-martialed for violently attacking his ex-wife and stepson. What's more, according to the person who reported his escape, Kelly made death threats against his bosses and had tried to sneak weapons onto the base while he was serving. So now the question for some Americans is how, despite that record, Devin Kelly got a gun. But if you followed our coverage last night, you'll know the focus is different in Sutherland Springs. Despite losing about 4% of the town's population in that church, as Paul Hunter found, they don't fear guns. They trust in them.
Oh.
Just up the highway from Sutherland Springs, and the shotguns are out. For skeet shooting. Friends who grew up with guns and the gun culture of Texas, who today agreed after the shoot to sit down and talk about guns and of those who'd push to toughen the laws around them. On that, it's a firm, not a chance.
The only problem I see with gun laws is that only the honest, nonviolent people are going to obey them. The other people are not. You know, just because you pass a law, it doesn't make the bad people go away.
If you took a gun and put it on the table, it's not going to hurt anybody. It's a tool. It's designed to shoot a projectile. You know, the argument is that it's designed to kill. It's designed to shoot a projectile. It's the shooter who points that projectile at whoever.
Many of us have a distrust of the government. And to us, it's quite obvious there is a lot of corruption there. And so why should I trust a politician to limit our access and our use for firearms? I just don't trust them, no matter who's in government.
I find it interesting that many of the people that are trying to take our guns also have the money and the wherewithal to have armed protection for themselves. So they're going to let the rest of us just float in the breeze when they have some, 6'6" guy with a Uzi under his coat to protect them. I don't know.
The three we met, a former FBI agent, a former oil executive, and a former casino card dealer, make a passionate, if familiar case. The real issue, they say, is mental health and criminal behavior.
This thing that happened in Sutherland it's just the worst thing that could happen. And we hate it. And we wish we could have stopped it. Lord knows if somebody had been carrying in that church, they could have stopped it sooner. The only thing that's going to ever stop that kind of thing is another gun, in this case. And that's sad to say, but look what happened. The guy across the street started shooting this guy. What did he do? He dropped his gun and ran.
Bad things are going to happen. The bad people are still going to be there. They can use a truck or a car to run people down. They can use a knife. A knife is a deadly weapon. They can use a baseball bat.
People raised Newtown. And people say Newtown was the time, that there were kids that were killed.
They were kids killed this past Sunday,
Fair
18-month-old.
enough. Yeah.
There's nobody that I know of who has come out with any kind of answer.
Would you accept a ban on high capacity?
No.
No?
No.
Why?
Well, I don't think it would do any good, for one thing. It's been proven it doesn't do any good. And Joe talks about a 10-round magazine. Supposing you're in a gunfight, and 10 rounds isn't enough.
Well, when was the last time, I mean this with respect, when was the last time you were in a gunfight? When are you going to need 10?
I've never been in a gunfight, and I hope I never am. But if I am, I certainly want to have enough ammunition.
There are no easy answers to this. That's the bottom line in this. There's no easy answers at all. And I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
And there are no easy answers. I wish there were some way to stop all these killings. But I wish we could find some answers.
Stop the killings, but keep the guns. A sobering bottom line and an unyielding one. Paul Hunter, CBC News, near Sutherland Springs, Texas.
Well, Rosie, no easy answers. Certainly those were honest ones, though. And it's staggering to think what, if anything, could change the course of the gun debate in the United States.
Well, it's sort of a cultural thing. I mean, I think that's what that conversation that Paul had with those gentlemen showed, right? And how do you change the culture around guns? I'm not sure.
Indeed.
All right. The Paradise Papers, though, are revealing another questionable investment by the royal family this time. It's Prince Charles who's being criticized. Leaked documents show that he owns shares in a company specializing in carbon offsets, an industry he championed. Then a year later, cashed out on. Here's Nalayed.
In the Borneo rainforest of Malaysia this week, Prince Charles is back again on familiar ground. How do we save the forests? It's a long-time passion. Now, leaked documents suggest it was also a source of quick profit and possibly a conflict of interest. Turns out, like the Queen's, his private estate, the Duchy of Cornwall, has millions invested offshore. And in just one buy and sell transaction, in just over a year, it tripled $100,000 investment in a company that specialized in carbon offsetting. The Bermuda-based company was co-run by a longtime friend, Hugh Van Cutsem. The two met in university back in the 60s. A Guardian newspaper investigation followed the money. There are literally hundreds of documents on the company in the Paradise Papers. In the minutes of one board meeting in February 2007, we see the initial purchase right here. It's 50 shares. And a bit lower down, you see that the board unanimously agrees that the Dutchy subscription be kept confidential, except for any disclosure required by law. And then we have this other document about a year and a half later, June 18th, 2008, mentioning the sale of those shares up here for $325,000. During that time, Prince Charles publicly promoted carbon offsetting 3 times within the first 7 months after the purchase, according to the BBC. In a statement, a spokesman for Clarence House told CBC News, the Prince has certainly never chosen to speak out on a topic simply because of a company that the Duchy may have invested in. That in the case of climate change, his views are well known. A Duchy spokesman added the Prince has no direct involvement in investment decisions, and none has any tax advantage based on location. Nothing illegal here, but it will surely prompt demands for more royal transparency.
The real problem with these revelations, even if Charles had no knowledge whatsoever of what was going on, is that the optics are terrible. It paints the future King of Britain in a bad light. It damages the brand of the British monarchy.
And with the 2 most senior royals now in the spotlight, their wealth seems even further beyond our usual imagination. Nala Ayed, CBC News, London.
Get the real story from CBC journalists all day long. Find powerful images on Instagram, exclusive video on Facebook, and of course, tweet us at CBC The National. And follow along with our conversation tonight using the hashtag CBC The National.
And the onus should not be on us to prove that he's not a terrorist. The onus should be on the police to prove that he is. And so
that is Sally Lane speaking out. Her son, Jack Letts, is known to some as Jihadi Jack, a convert to Islam who in 2014 traveled to ISIS-controlled territory in Syria. But according to his parents, he's no extremist. They believe their son now faces torture in a Kurdish prison and that the UK and Canada are doing little to help. Margaret Evans sat down with them to try to untangle his tale and his fate.
Autumn sliding towards winter. John Letts and Sally Lane still hope for the return of the son they raised in this quiet Oxford neighbourhood. Echoes of childhood lingering still.
Look at that smile, mischievous smile.
It's hard not to look back.
That's a good one, Jack.
The family album full of pictures of a smiling boy who used to vacation in his father's native Canada. When he was 16, he converted to Islam. At 18, he left England for Jordan and Kuwait and then Syria.
We just said goodbye thinking he was going on a 10-day, holiday to Jordan, which I'm sure is why he left.
3 years later, he is reportedly in a prison in the so-called Democratic Federation of Northern Syria, captured by the Kurdish militia controlling it as he tried to leave ISIS-held territory in May. He gave a telephone interview to the BBC from the jail not long afterwards.
Supposedly we were going to just go to the Kurdish territories for a bit and then continue to Turkey. And then as soon as we got here, we got arrested and put in prison.
The Kurds have issued a statement saying that Jack Letts is alive, but they call him a prisoner of war and say he's being investigated by what they describe as local and global anti-terror units. They also say they will hand him over to Britain or Canada if they ask for him. But both governments have declined to answer a series of questions posed to them by the CBC.
You have to get me back in now.
Jack Letts' parents believe emphatically that the child they raised went to Syria either for religious purposes or humanitarian reasons.
Yeah.
Very good.
But the British media has painted him as an Islamic State fighter, taking a wife and having a child in Raqqa or Mosul, dubbing him Jihadi Jack. That branding, says his mother, has made it almost impossible to win help.
In our dealings with the Canadian government, they have told us that they were operating on the assumption that Jack is alive. We think this is not good enough, since there are a lot of personnel on the ground where you could get proof of life.
Whether governments want to make the effort or not is another matter. Public opinion in Britain, for example, doesn't favor allowing those suspected of having ties to ISIS to return. Panelists on this popular BBC TV show all favor offering due process. Not so the audience.
Should they be allowed back into the UK? That was your question.
Don't let them back in. Don't let them back in.
And you? You, sir?
Why would you want them back when you've seen the atrocities that have been caused by these people?
That's the public mood. And I think that public mood does shape political policy.
Haris Rafiq is an expert in countering extremism.
And the mood amongst many politicians is that if this problem could be dealt with in Iraq or Syria without having to deal with it here in the UK, I think they'd rather that would happen than have to deal with the problem back here.
The lawyer for the Letts, Tayyab Ali, says that's not good enough.
We don't know whether Jack is even in a process, an illegal process. We don't know if Jack's alive. We don't know if Jack's dead.
His parents believe he's alive, and that whatever he may have done, he deserves the chance to answer for it.
We still love him. We believe in him. I don't think he'd ever be capable of doing anything what they claim that the jihadis do and that some have said he's done. Just not Jack. It's not possible.
Their son went to Syria, they say, seeking a greater truth. Now they, too, are searching for one. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Oxford.
So we have been trying today to get a bit more information about exactly where Jack Letts is, putting questions just this morning to Kurdish military intelligence. No answers so far. We're not going to let go, but here's how it usually works. Typically, if Iraqi Kurdish forces catch foreigners, they just hand them over to the Americans right away. If Syrian Kurds find them, they imprison them. Now, the Syrian Kurds won't say how many foreigners they're holding, just that they have some important ones.
In terms of hardcore foreign fighters.
And when the U.S. presidential envoy in the region was asked about the fate of foreign ISIS fighters a few weeks ago, he was blunt.
The mission is to make sure that no foreign fighters, any foreign fighter who is here, who joined ISIS from a foreign country and came into Syria, they will die here in Syria.
We know roughly 40,000 foreign fighters joined ISIS. Thousands have been killed. At least 6,000 have gone home. And CSIS still offers about 180 as the number of Canadians who left to fight with terror groups, 60 who came back to Canada, which doesn't mean they went to jail. Public Safety Canada says only 5 Canadians have been charged and there are no convictions yet, in part because proof is really hard. Consider this. That is the ISIS job application form for Hussein Barout of Calgary. CBC chased this story, found he had returned to Canada, but there are no charges for him yet. Filling out the form isn't enough evidence. Countries all over the world are struggling with what to do about this, but under international human rights law, everyone, no matter who they are or what they did, has rights and is entitled to due process. Go deeper on the stories of the day earlier in the day. Subscribe to our newsletter at cbcnews.ca/The National. The National Today takes you inside our journalism every afternoon.
The weapons you are acquiring are not making you safer. They are putting your regime in grave danger. Every step you take down this dark path increases the peril you face.
In South Korea, U.S. President Donald Trump is sending a message to the North, warning Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons and repeating the message of peace through strength. South Korean lawmakers, as you can see here, applauded Trump's speech at the National Assembly, but outside, on the streets of Seoul, the U.S. president's visit has sparked days of large protests. After the intense public outcry, we knew this was coming. But today, 2 Muslim and civil rights groups made it official. They've launched a legal challenge over Quebec's controversial face covering ban. They filed the application this morning in Superior Court. The group's main argument, the law is an infringement on Muslim women's religious rights. And check out this video from CBC producer Jen Barr. She and reporter Joanna Remiliotis were caught up in flash flooding in San Juan, Puerto Rico. They're on assignment for a story airing in the next couple of weeks on The National. But right now, a powerful rainstorm is hitting the island, and there's a flood advisory in place. Now, it just adds to the misery for Puerto Ricans still struggling to recover from Hurricane Maria. Much of the island still without power after that storm swept through about a month and a half ago.
And tonight, tributes continue to come in for retired baseball superstar and philanthropist Roy Halladay. Before we go, we want to show you a tribute that he wrote after he was traded from the Blue Jays in 2009. In a full-page newspaper ad, he expressed his deepest gratitude to the Blue Jays organization, its fans, and the city. Toronto, he wrote, will forever have a special place in my heart. The memories will last a lifetime. And that is The National for this November the 7th. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Night.